Welcome back to Unraveling the Brain. I'm your host, Dr. Josh Madsen. Today I get the great pleasure of interviewing Professor Elijah Dix. He is a good friend of mine, professor of history for 14 years prior. He's doing some different things now, which we're going to get into, but we are going to talk a lot about, what we're designed to do, what our bodies have been designed to do, and, you don't really know where you're going unless you know where you came from. And so I'm excited to chat a lot about that today in this interview and get insight from someone who's really studied this to a really high level. So let's get in the show. What's up, Eli? How are you, man?
I'm good, man. How you doing?
I'm good. Well, I'm excited to chat with you. We've had many conversations over everything, really, but a lot of conversations over like what the body's designed to do, what the all the different fun facts you always bring together with kids, and like how they start doing different things at different times. But so I'm excited to talk about that. But let's first and foremost maybe introduce yourself, your history of kind of what you've been doing and what you're doing now.
Yeah. So like you said, Elijah Dix. I taught history for 14 years, primarily world civilization and Western Civ. So a lot of non-American stuff. There's a lot of American historians. And so there's a bit of a gap there where you could come in, you could get jobs at different places rather easily if you could teach other things.
Yep.
So when I was first starting out, I was an adjunct, and a lot of people take that route, right? So you teach, say, a class or a couple classes at a college, and then you are kind of looking for that full-time position as you're gaining experience. But I was told early on by my department chair that I should teach as many classes in as many different fields as I possibly could. And so it's funny, I didn't know really much at all about like Islamic civilization. And I remember I got a call from a guy who was a department chair at a different college in Denver. And he's like, hey, it's like, would you be interested in teaching Islamic civilization? Because you were recommended to me by my, or by your department chair. And I was like, yeah, of course. I would love to. Like, you better believe it. And I kid you not, it's embarrassing, but I went out and I just started gobbling up every book I could possibly find, trying to catch myself up on it. And so that's kind of how you learn the stuff, right? So like if
you learn by experience, just getting into it and reading a ton.
Yeah, because you can't learn everything that happened in the history of the world. Obviously, That's not how it works. But what you can do is you kind of get a broad sort of 10,000 foot understanding of kind of what occurred, and then you can dive deeper into those things. And so I ended up teaching classes on like Islamic civilization, but all sorts of specialty courses on everything from like Caribbean history of pirates, to Civil War stuff, to Revolutionary War, which is funny because, again, like I was a world historian, but a lot of people weren't as comfortable jumping into these special topics courses. And I just like learning whatever I can about anything I can.
Yeah. And that was kind of your past, and now you're going into, you have a course that you've developed, and through that we've had a lot of conversations about, which I want to talk about that course too, but we've had a lot of conversations around more or less what we're designed to do in a way of like what our body's designed to do, all these special capabilities, different things that happen as we mature and grow, and it's a lot of stuff around nature too. So I definitely want to, it might even be a really great point to get into what your course is about, and then we can start having some points off of that of maybe some of those topics that we've.
Yeah, of course. So the course is, it's a historically and anthropologically based men's program that is kind of about helping guys understand who we are, rather maybe who we were, but who we are,
right,
and what we need in order to thrive, not just survive, but thrive in the present. So it kind of takes a look back at our masculine roots, and then diving into the need for our connection with nature, looking at our need for brotherhood, our need for adventure, our need for risk, developing close relationships, not just in the brotherhood sense, but also with our significant others, and forging a lasting legacy as well.
So you're saying that connection to nature is really important. Let's talk about that aspect,
Absolutely.
Especially as a kid grows. That's huge, because obviously we talk a lot about kids, and so we'll go down that path a little bit. But let's talk about aspects of nature and kids and development. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I guess the best place to start is kind of at the present, which when you look at that connection that kids have with nature today, it's so different from, our generation, but even, it's striking compared to the generation.
Yeah, they're
before
inside
us.
all day. They're playing video games all day. They don't even get a suntan during the summer.
Right.
It's
We
wild.
spend 93% of our time indoors today. 93%.
That is insane. That's a big stat.
You're right.
When we used to spend 93% of it outdoors.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. And so it's kind of cool because I mean, it's not cool, it's bad, but let me get into how it's interesting. So we spend 93% of our time indoors, but kids today spend half the time outdoors that we spent when we were kids.
Right.
Right. So not only are we spending less time outdoors than we did when we were kids, but our kids are spending half the time, that outdoors today that we used to spend.
Yeah, and I think of that on like that sensory aspect of how much that helps to develop the brain of just being out in nature, jumping over stuff, jumping onto stuff, getting into water. Like you're getting all that sensory input. You're moving, you're getting blood flow to your brain to help it to develop. Those things just don't happen. They don't get to happen.
Yeah, it's everything. It's mental, it's physical. I'd argue it's spiritual as well. Like there's a lot of stuff that you're missing out on. But it's interesting. There's a book by a guy named Dr. Randall Eaton, and it's called From Boys to Men of Heart. And so it's I think the subtitle is Male Rites of Passage Through Hunting is what it's about. So kind of allowing a boy to, and we can talk about that a bit in detail later if you want, but it's about kind of ushering boys into manhood through rites of passage in hunting, which is what men and boys, this was our job for most of history. But in that book, he talks about the changes we've had in the things you're talking about, in like sensory and in the way that our brains are even working. So 20 years ago, for instance, it's pretty interesting. So 20 years ago, the average human could identify somewhere around 300,000 different sounds, right? So we would hear the noise and we could identify what that was. But today it's around 100,000 different sounds that we can identify. We could discern around 350 different shades of color. And today, this is, again, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And today it's around 130 different shades of color.
That's insane.
Yeah. Like we're missing out on the development that we received from extensive periods in nature, but we're also missing out, not missing out, we're also just getting overstimulated. There's so much distraction, there's so much stimulation that we're tuning so much out.
Right. And just even from that aspect of like what all those different sounds do for development of our auditory cortex, for learning different languages, especially a young kid, they're taking in everything. And the more different frequencies of sounds they can hear, the more they can produce. And a lot of these languages, they don't share the exact same frequencies of sound. But do you think that's mostly just from not exposure to, you get those sounds in nature and we're not getting that? Or is it that we have developed such an attune ability to hear certain sounds that we only get from electronics or from inside?
I think it's both. I think so. We're missing all that outdoor noise, but we're also tuning so much out when we, just there's so much stimulation.
Yeah, if you've ever seen a kid play a video game, you can say, hey, Jake, and then let me know you're there.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm a big numbers guy. It helps me understand how important things are, sort of at what level things are.
Right.
And I think today, if I remember right, the average American spends something like 4 hours and 37 minutes on their phone each day. Okay. But then we spend another 3 hours watching TV.
Television.
So it's amazing. It's like 8 hours a day. It's like a full-time job. We spend entertaining ourselves with screens, with devices.
That's just insane. Just like think of how many more beneficial things you could do with your day.
Yeah, there's a lot of opportunity for growth, for adventure, for experiences, but we don't get it, and we're super distracted, right? That's what we're talking about. We're super distracted, but we're also not gaining that experience in nature. I mean, if we're spending, just think about it, if we're spending 93% of our time indoors, so that works out to like what, an hour-ish that we're not indoors. Okay. Yeah. The average maximum security inmate spends 2 hours a day outside.
Yeah.
And they're not free.
Right.
We are free.
And we get to do that. They're getting more time than us.
They're getting double the outdoor exposure. They're getting 4 times as much outdoor time as the average child is today.
That's just absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And then we wonder why, all these kids are having developmental challenges, and there's a lot of other things that go into it, but this is definitely one big thing that I thoroughly agree on is this is huge. Like we develop through movement and maybe even getting into some of the aspects of we develop through movement, but we develop all these specialty skills around it. We've talked about this before, but we've all these specialty skills around like hunting and around being in nature and to be able to do those things. But one side note I want to say is one thing that I really, really respect about you is every single time we've ever hung out, which we hang out pretty often, I've almost never seen you on your phone. You're always engaged.
Thanks, man.
You're always super engaged with what's going on around you, with who's around you, which is like a huge breath of fresh air because it's hard to find.
I appreciate that.
But anyways, that was a side note.
Yeah, no, it's great. Well, it's funny. In the Roosevelt Society, part of the program is monitoring your screen time as well. And so a lot of the guys will cut their screen time down by 2/3, maybe even more over the course of the program. Yeah. Like you just have to disconnect from it. It's addictive. It's meant to be addictive.
100%.
Right. Like I'm sure, you've heard of the book Digital Detox. Maybe you've read it, but in the book, he kind of breaks down in detail, like it's designed from the ground up to be addictive.
Right. It's designed to give you hits of dopamine over
colors,
and over
everything.
and over
And
again.
it's about dopamine. It's about distraction. It's about keeping people coming back.
Yeah. The more dopamine you get. I mean, like I talk about this with parents all the time of like video games. They're designed to literally get them to get hits of dopamine all the time. And then they wonder why their kid can't focus. Well, you have to have dopamine to focus. And if you have this super, super addictive game, and then you go into everyday life, you're not getting that dopamine hit. They're constantly looking for that dopamine hit. So they're constantly distracted and trying to get that same response because their brain is so used to getting so much dopamine from these devices.
Yeah. And what's interesting too, since you're mentioning it, is that a lot of these games prey on sort of our evolutionary biology as well. Like it's targeted to light up certain parts of our brain.
Ooh, let's talk about this. This is exciting.
So like, So if you look at, there's a bunch of statistics that have come out on this. And if you look at games like first-person shooter games, okay, first-person shooter games are somewhere around like 97% of the players are men. Like why? I mean, it's available to women, right? I mean, it's marketed everywhere. But again, the vast majority, almost all of them are men. And it's because the reason for this
why is that?
It's because you're triggering hunting instinct, okay? And then, yes, you are hunting men, and historically you weren't hunting men, but you were hunting.
Yeah, you're hunting, yeah.
Yeah, and you're triggering that hunting instinct, and you're triggering the how would I put it? You're also triggering the desire and the innate characteristic of wanting to work in small groups of men to solve problems, usually in the form of hunting, right? So like throughout most of human history, effectively 99.5% of all human history, men were hunters, right? That's what we did. We hunted and we protected. And you can imagine then how if you create a game that you want men
working in teams to hunt.
Yeah, that you're working in small groups to hunt, right? You're using tactics in order to bring about the death of the thing that you're going after. Right. And I'm not getting into like whether those games are really good for you or really bad for you as far as
it's just that they're using that
it's just that they're clearly using that mechanism. Yeah, in the same way that like for women, for instance, like women throughout most human history were gatherers, right? They engaged in gathering, they engaged in child rearing. And a lot of, that activity brings about certain characteristics, right? So women are much better in communication, generally speaking, based on statistics, better in communication, better, socializing.
100%.
And they have unique characteristics that come from gathering. So like they can see static objects better than men. They can
colors and
they
stuff
see
like that.
colors, the different shades of
my
colors.
wife can decorate and I can't. I can't even tell what's gray or black and blue or black. And
Katie will hold up two colors and she'll say, what are these? And I'll say orange, right? And she'll say no. She's like, this one's tangerine marmalade and this one's like autumn sunrise or something, right? And she's not just being finicky.
They can truly see that.
They can see significantly more colors. But what I was getting at is, because they've evolved in a certain way and they sort of evolved to have certain attributes, some games are, of course, designed for that. So like The Sims is overwhelmingly played by women because it's about communication and it's about relationships and things like that. So
What is The Sims?
The Sims is, you want to help me out on this? How would you describe?
You've played Sims, haven't you?
I haven't, but I know people that do. It's like a life simulator.
Yeah.
Like you're a person, you build a family, a social sphere.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Simulated life.
Yeah, which again, it makes sense. It doesn't mean that men can't play Sims. It doesn't mean that women can't play first-person shooters. But it does mean that these games clearly are directed towards certain evolutionary biology of different groups, right? So it's this game is directed towards this group, and this game is directed towards this group.
Such an interesting way to think of it, because I would have never, ever linked those in my own head together. But now that you say it, it's like, well, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So I remember a while back you had talked to me about, like, there's certain things that kids do at an early age, based off of this whole evolutionary mechanism. And let's get into that, because like there was an aspect of, like, way that certain kids start dreaming at a certain time of certain things, and kids start throwing rocks at certain ages, and differences in sex as well with that. And so I thought that was really interesting. I think a lot of people would be interested in hearing that as well. So let's jump into that topic.
Yeah, gladly. I have a son, 2 years old. You've got a little boy too, right? They play together, and you notice a lot of stuff too. So what's interesting was when I went down this path, originally studying a lot of this, I didn't have a kid at that time, but now being a dad and seeing this stuff unfold and seeing it line up with
seeing it actually happen to your own kid,
right? Seeing it firsthand, I'm like, well, I can't deny what I'm seeing here.
Right. I remember the first time you told me, I was like, my son just started doing that.
Yeah. So, we've talked about this before, but it's great for other people to hear it. But there was there's a study done by this guy named Abel Ibisfeld. And so he is a really interesting name, right?
Has to be Russian.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what originally he was, if he was Austrian or something like that. But Abel Ibisfeld. But he has this amazing profession. He is a human ethologist. So a human ethologist. So ethology is a study of animals. So a human ethologist is studying humans as if they were animals. So what that means is, instead of me asking you, like, Josh, why did you do that? Instead, human ethologists would just sit back and watch you do it, and then gauge sort of
the philosophy of why they did that.
Why you did it, right? Because you can't ask a lion why they did this. You can't ask a tiger why they did that.
Right.
You just observe them, and you make you deduce what you're seeing into this is what's probably happening here. Because humans don't always tell the truth, and that's not that we're necessarily always lying. It's just sometimes
perception's different than someone else's.
Exactly. So he's a human ethologist. So it's a very unique way of looking at things. But he did a study, and it was across 60 different countries all over the world. I mean, it was a huge study. And he found that in every single country that boys between the ages of 4 and 5 start throwing stones competitively with one another. In every culture, in every country that he studied, in 60 countries around the world, all those cultures, all those groups, those boys were throwing rocks between the ages of 4 and 5 years old. But girls don't. That's the difference, is that boys begin throwing them, but girls don't throw them.
Why did boys start throwing them at that age versus girls don't do that at all? Start throwing rocks at that age versus girls don't do it at all.
That's a really good question that we can answer, though.
Yeah. What did the study find?
Sure. So a couple things, though. First of all, you might have people who hear that and would immediately say, well, hold on a second. Maybe people are stopping girls from throwing stones. Maybe, nowadays, immediately you start having these ideas. Maybe boys are watching men throw stones or, something along those lines. But there's absolutely no evidence to support any of that stuff, right? Yeah. Boys throw stones, whether they're the men in their lives or the women in their lives or anybody in their lives throw stones or don't throw stones.
Right. My son throws stones, and it's not like I was teaching him to throw stones.
Right.
I never did. Right. It's not like I'm like, oh, let's pick up a stone and throw it.
No, exactly. Like, we throw stones no matter what. It's just something innate in us. And so why do we do it? Well, we do it because the making and throwing of stones, rather the picking and throwing of stones, the making and crafting of weapons, goes back all the way to our phylogenetic blueprint, right? All the way back. something that's been in our ancestors for millions of years. And its emergence at a predictable age among boys, but not girls, but of boys, is evidence of boys effectively being hunters at their core.
Right.
And that's what they are. So they make weapons. They throw stones. And they do, by the way, I don't think I even went in that, but boys will also make weapons out of just about everything.
Oh yeah, I remember doing that when I was a kid.
And again, like we're not just talking like guns, though they'll like chew a graham cracker to make a gun. You know, it is what it is. But every stick is a spear, right? Everything's
or a sword, or
exactly. Everything's a knife, right? They love that stuff. And again, you have to think back, like what's going on in their brain. Well, you know, humans, we don't have fangs, like we don't really have claws, right? We don't have a spiky tail, right?
Yeah.
We don't have these things. And so what do we have? Well, we have the brain and we have the flexible, dexterous hands that allow us to look around at the world around us and manipulate the objects that we see into weapons.
Yeah, and visualize what that's going to, like what we want that to be, like that whole process of, well, I have to take the stick and I have to do this and this and this and this to create something in the future, which that's something that a lot of other animals don't have, is they can't plan in the future, which that's an interesting point off of that too.
Yeah, yeah. So you know, there's nothing, if your kid's running outside and picking up a stick and immediately attacking trees or what have you, there's nothing wrong with your kid. He's just male.
Yeah, it's just
right.
what he's designed to do.
It's what he's designed to do. And you know, there's even more to it. Like there's a study done by Bruno Bettelheim, and I think he taught at the University of Chicago ways back, but he did a study and he found that boys and girls began having similar dreams again around the ages of 4 and 5. Okay. And for boys, they begin dreaming around this age, again, predictable, cross-cultural, you know, doesn't matter what country you're in. We see this again and again and again, is that boys begin having dreams about large predators around the ages of 4 and 5. But girls begin dreaming about snakes and spiders at the same time.
And does that go back to, well, obviously what they're either hunting or what they're either afraid of? What
was the greatest threat to men throughout most of history? It's large predators. Right. What's the greatest threat to women throughout most of history? Snakes and spiders. Because one is hunting big game and one is gathering.
Right.
And the idea, though, that the fact that these ancestral memories are sort of bubbling up to the surface and it's impacting a child already at that age and preparing them for what's to come, even though nowadays that's probably not to come, right?
Yeah, we don't have that at all.
Yeah, you can't turn off 10,000 generations of evolution, of adaptations. Like you can't do it.
Yeah. The talking about some of these adaptations, you know, I've read a lot of different books on different adaptations. I'd love to go into that. Some of these skills that we had at one point, but now we don't use and therefore we don't have. Like those, I think those would be really fun to talk about because they show the amazing abilities of a human that we never access because we never get put into a scenario where we need to use them. So I think that would be fun to talk about next year. Give me 1 second though. I'm going to go check to make sure I didn't adjust someone.
I'm hopping in here for a second just to ask a couple questions. So as a follow-up to talking about some of those generational traits or responsibilities or things that, you know, men being the hunters and gatherers and looking at that, what if there are some people that go against that and, you know, aren't necessarily like a man's man? Or how do you still support that and say, hey, wave your own flag, but at the same time try and instill and incorporate some of these generational things that
yeah, sure. I mean, look, you be you, right? Whatever, you know, I'm not telling everybody they got to go out and they got to do all this stuff. I'm just saying, you know, you are the result of 10,000 generations of hunters. Like that's just is what it is. And if you never give yourself the opportunity to go out and have some of these experiences, again, I'm not saying you have to go out and shoot a deer or anything like that, but getting out into nature, you know, getting in close proximity to animals. You know, if you don't want to shoot an animal, shoot a picture of an animal, right? Like get out there and start interacting with nature, interacting with animals. And I think that instinct might slowly, you know, kind of come back, if you will. Like
Just adapt in its own particular way.
I mean,
I like that analogy that you said. You don't have to like shoot something with the gun, but like, you know, if you want to take a photograph, shoot.
Dip your toe in the water. Just go out camping.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's all well and good. But, you know, I think it's different for adults. Like I was, you know, like I'm 43 years old. So for, you know, if I hadn't hunted for 43 years, those instincts aren't going to be very sharp, right? Because I've gone 43 years of my entire life, and maybe I didn't have any of those experiences. But you're talking about a child who's coming off of 10,000 generations, and he's programmed for the world that we left behind, not the current world. That's the difference, right? And so after a few years of he's getting his bearings, he's learning how to walk, he's learning how to move, that you start introducing him to hunting, more than likely he's going to take to it in the same way that if you take a tiger cub, right, and you introduce it, you know, when it's young out into nature, you're going to see its instincts coming out. It just will. And, you know, I'm not saying that they're going to go and just start murdering all sorts of animals.
Hopefully not. Yeah.
Hopefully not. But you'll see that instinct. Like it absolutely will. It absolutely will come out. I mean, my kid's 2, and the way he looks at our dog, you know, you can tell that he stalks it. You know, I've never stalked my dog before, but he naturally will take a position around the couch. He'll slowly approach it. He'll come up with different angles and how he's going to do it. It's amazing seeing it, but it's not that surprising when you think about, again, what is he primed for? He's not primed for a life of sitting behind a desk, you know, behind a computer. That's not what he's primed for.
Well, now, how long do you think it would take to unlearn some of those things? Like, we have a lot of technology. We have a lot of things that have foundationally changed our lives, that we're not out hunting and gathering all the time anymore. Like, how many generations of that do you think, until I know that there's, you know, tons and tons of generations to really instill that, but at what point does it start breaking? Can we get away from that?
No. I mean, that's the timetable to unevolve something like that out. It's just not gonna. Or even
happen. Just mutate or evolve a different direction.
No, like we can change socially about like what's acceptable and what's not, but you can't turn off those adaptations, right? Like those instincts, you know, all that stuff. You can't turn that off. It's like for instance, there's a tree called a honey locust. Okay. So you'll see this around swampy areas, particularly along like rivers. And if you ever see like a river, just kind of take your time, like walk down and look at the trees, try to find one. It'll stand out. Honey locusts will have these really long thorns. I mean, they can be like 6 inches, 8 inches long, and they're just massive. Okay. And like as they get older, they turn sort of like a stone gray, and they're just gnarly looking. They're amazing, right? And you see these things, and they're covering the entire trunk of the tree, and you're like, what in the world? Like, what am I looking at there? Well, those honey locusts evolved those thorns to protect it from grazing megafauna, like woolly mammoths. And woolly mammoths would eat the seed pods on those, right? But woolly mammoths died off 10,000 years ago. I mean, for the most part, right? And, you know, depending on where you are. But those thorns still remain, and they'll remain for a very long time, even though there's nothing threatening it, right? Nothing is trying to climb up that tree and get to those seed pods anymore, right? These things, you know, everybody cuts down honey locusts. You don't keep them anywhere near you. But if you go to places where we aren't, you'll find things that once were, and you'll see these trees there that, I mean, again, amazingly enough, they've got their armor on to protect themselves from woolly mammoths, and it's, last I checked, 2024, right? But that's my point being is that it takes a long time for things to devolve from what they were designed to do. And so in our case, it would take a very long time.
Neat. Awesome. Thanks for letting me jump in. I'm going to jump back out here and let you come back in.
This video is sponsored by Unraveling the Brain, which is actually my course to train doctors to help these kids in the way that we do. So if you guys know anyone and know any doctors that are in your area that, you know, are maybe interested in working with kids, go ahead and send them a link to limitlessfoundation.co so that way I can help train them so you guys have a provider close to you guys. Let's jump to the show. I know you know more about this than I do, but I read this book. I think it was called Breathe. I think it was one of James Nestor's. I think that was the one. It was one by James Nestor, I know for sure. But it talked about all these adaptations that we have as humans, but that we never use. Like, for example, we have the ability to do echolocation. He talks about a guy that is completely blind, and he uses clicking, and he can skateboard, he can ride his bike, he can do all these things, right? But we needed that at one point to be able to navigate in the dark, like in the forest, completely blacked out. We needed that to be able to navigate. Well, now we have lights, we don't need that skill, but we've lost it. Or I shouldn't say we've lost it, we've
Forgotten it.
never developed it, whatever, or never used it, so we never developed it type of thing. Or like the ability to dive hundreds of feet deep into the water because we have these different diving reflexes and that we never use. Well, I guess certain people do. Certain people dive super deep, hundreds of feet down, and can do that. And our ability to navigate the world, like most people always know where north is or east is or west, or especially males know that more than females, which is probably good hunting.
We like to think we know.
Yeah, at least we know. That way north, I know it is.
I feel it.
Yeah, but
this feels north.
Yeah, but he was talking about like these people that they blindfolded them, these college students, drove them all around, like just, and got, stopped somewhere and said, okay, find your way back. And they were able to find their way back just by like, well, I feel like it's this way. And they were able to figure out as they turned and what direction they were going and all that type of stuff. But you probably know of a lot more of those skills that we have that we just never use anymore.
Yeah, you named a lot of cool ones.
Those are pretty cool.
Yeah, those are pretty cool.
I wish I could do some of those.
Yeah, Randall Eaton, the guy who wrote the From Boys to Men at Heart book, he has a blurb in one of his books where he talks about it, and he talks about how interesting it is that you can sometimes feel somebody looking at you from behind.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You can't see them.
Yes, you can.
But you can feel the eyes on you. It's fascinating, right? And if something surprises you, say from behind, we all, like all humans, do the exact same movement, right? This dumb thing that we do, right? But again, like that instinct would save your life. That instinct is about protecting your neck, the back of your neck, because you get a large predator pounced on you. That's what they're going to go for. They're going to go for the
paralyze
back of your neck.
and you're not moving.
Yeah. And like nowadays, right? Somebody just says, "Hey, Josh," you get the same movement, right? But they're obviously probably not going to bite you in the back of the head,
right?
Yeah,
that's true, very true.
But my point being though is there's so many of those things. The things that you're mentioning, the idea that you get those feelings when something's watching you, somebody's watching you. There's a couple great books I just finished, I think like probably a month ago, and they're by this guy, last name Capstick. It's something Hathaway Capstick, and he was a safari hunter in Africa for a really long time. And actually, a really interesting story. He was originally a stock trader in New York, and he quit his job to hunt jaguars in South America, and then he became a safari hunter in Africa. But in his books, he talks all the time about in Africa where he'd be, if you're a safari hunter and you're taking people out hunting, okay, so if you're a safari guide, because he was hunter and a guide, but if you take people out hunting in Africa and they wound an animal, legally the safari guides have to go in and dispatch that animal. You can't leave a wounded animal.
Right.
So he would have to go out and find these wounded animals. But he would talk about how it was amazing that he could walk into an area, right, into whether that's just a grassland or whether that was sort of like a wooded little cove. But he said when he walked into it, he would know immediately when there was a predator looking at him, and he knew it, and he was right every time. Every time he felt it, and he knew it was close and it was coming, he'd get pounced on, and either of course he had to shoot it or he would get pounced on,
right?
Which he did. He got attacked by leopards, he got attacked by tigers, or I'm sorry, not tigers, lions. He got attacked by all sorts of things. But again, it's how do you explain that, right? How do you explain that instinct of something's watching me, but not only is something watching you, but something's watching me and it's intent now on getting me. And you know it's coming. And you instantly effectively just turn your modern brain off and allow the old one to take the wheel.
Survival mechanism.
Yeah, you let it take the wheel and just you trust that the instincts will kick in and do what they need to do. That's exactly what I mean. The fact that he survived all these
things.
all these things. Yeah,
You know, I think it's really interesting because like what I think is interesting about all of this, number one, is the things that we need to be healthy are all the things that, like, you know, as more and more, you know, information comes out and research comes out, and, you know, someone thinks they're like, I think of like Wim Hof, for example, like he goes in freezing cold water all the time. He can heat his own body temperature, and everyone thinks he's crazy until we look back and think, well, why do we have the ability to do that? And also, when we do those things, we get into freezing cold water, our overall inflammation goes down, our body gets healthier, our brain gets healthier, and now it's like oh, that's really good for your health. But this guy was crazy, like, you know, 10 years ago or whatever it was. I don't know the exact, but now we're finding out that's really healthy and for you. Or like, for example, humans can run for super long distances because we can sweat and all those things, but we now, like, really good for blood flow to the brain. It makes you smarter. I mean, I think of the cross country team in college, they were the smartest kids because they had so much more blood flow to their brain. But I think of all these things that, like, we are meant to do, our body's designed to do, and how those things make us so much healthier. And when we stray away from those things, how we get so much sicker.
100%.
And so maybe my question would be is, what are maybe some of the things that are the most important to focus on? And this I know is in your course too, but to get back to these things that we're designed to do, to not only just improve our overall mentality and all that type of stuff, but also to make us healthier.
Yeah. I mean, hands down, it's reconnecting with nature and getting active.
What is getting connected with nature?
And if I could add one more thing, is nutrition as well. I mean, those are key. But
for sure.
So sorry, go ahead.
What is the aspect of getting involved with nature? How does that improve our health?
Yeah. So there's a term, it's called biophilia, and it's based off this book that a Harvard professor wrote a while back. But biophilia is the idea. It literally means love of living things, right? Philia, love, bio, life, love of life, love of living things. But the idea, the concept of it is that because we evolved in nature, we're effectively designed, evolved, however you want to look at that, to function optimally within it. And when we aren't in nature, it's like we're missing a necessary nutrient and we go a little bit haywire, right? I mean, there's a reason that we have the highest rates of depression, anxiety, all these things today, right? It's a lot of it has to do with the combination of, I mean, there's a couple things here, but the lack of connection with nature, of time in nature, obviously the lack of activity, the food that we put in our bodies, and the environment in which we live.
Yeah, and there's research that supports that too, of like when people have anxiety and depression and they go into settings that are filled with nature, like they do a lot better.
Well, yeah, they're now saying, there's numerous studies, you can look this up, they're now saying that physical activity and outdoor, in particular, activity has better responses to, or provides a better treatment for depression and anxiety than pills nowadays. Yeah. I mean, we know then that the pills are, and there's nothing to, look, if you're at a place,
time and a place.
Yeah, exactly. But we don't prescribe people, hey, you need to get outside, and hey, you need to get moving, you need to get active. And then, there's all sorts of other things you can add. You need to have some adventure. You need to get some sunshine. Like there's a lot of other stuff that will help. But there's
all of those things bring so much more dopamine to your brain, bring so much more serotonin to your brain. Like all of those things that make connected, bring all those things.
Yeah, well, think about this. So when you go to the zoo, you see the tiger or the lion, right, pacing in its cage, and you see that and you think, oh, that poor animal, like if he was out there, he'd be doing this, he'd be doing that, he'd have all this place to run and do what it needs to do. But what's weird is like, how's that any different than us, right? Like effectively, we built our own cages is what we did.
100%.
Right? Comfortable cages for the most part. I mean, most of us have we have climate controlled apartments or homes, right? We have refrigerators with food that's right there. We could pick up a device and call somebody and they'll come and bring us food. I mean, it's a crazy world that we live in, unbelievably comfortable, right? But you just think, how funny is it that we've crafted these cages and we've declared these cages our new natural, but there's nothing natural about it. Nothing.
Yeah.
And there's a great book, by the way, by Desmond, I'm forgetting his last name right now, but Desmond Morris, and it's called The Human Zoo. And this guy it's awesome. He wrote it ages ago, but there's a lot of great stuff that was written ages ago that people just haven't tapped, like they haven't found it, and they aren't using it. And I read a lot, like you, right? And I come as a historian, I come across a lot of older stuff. But this one's not that old. I think he wrote it in like the 1980s or so. But he was a zoologist who, I believe he ran the London Zoo. And just to be clear, zoologists don't run zoos, right? Like, just in case somebody's watching this and they're like, that's not what that means.
I wouldn't have known that.
Yeah, okay. So it's different. But he was a zoologist. He was a scientist, but he also ran the zoo, okay? But what he noticed, and this was what was really interesting, is what he noticed as he was running this facility, is that all the animals coming into captivity all changed their natural behavior, okay? They would get anxious. They would get depressed. They develop psychopathy, right? They had all these strange behaviors that began manifesting themselves once they came into captivity. So, for instance, like if you put a chimpanzee in captivity, they'll begin masturbating. But chimpanzees in the wild don't masturbate, right? So there's these incredible transitions that occur within us when we are put in captivity. But I don't think we tend to think of it that way, but we should, right?
We think of it as
we're comfortable.
We're
We're comfortable. But we are. But we're also in a self-imposed captivity. We absolutely are. And we are manifesting the exact same behaviors and problems that, all the other life forms on this planet exhibit when they're put in captivity.
Right. Yeah.
And we're trying to treat it with, all you need to do is take this or take that. When in reality, it's maybe your problem's that you're in captivity.
Yeah, and you're stuck. You're on devices all the time.
100%.
You're not getting moving. And
exactly. Add that to it.
Yeah.
And you can start to see how going out into nature, reconnecting with the natural world, particularly when you're evolved to function optimally within it, that's going to have a tremendous effect on your health, on your well-being, right? On all that stuff.
And connection with people. Going off that, your course is designed around getting back to that, but also some other aspects that I think is really important for men to learn about what we're designed to do and how to optimize that in today's world. And that's, I know a big piece of your course. So let's talk about your course, because
sure.
Yeah, I haven't taken it yet, but I've wanted to take it the last couple of times. Just haven't been invited. So.
Well, one cool thing, by the way, is because we've taken some time off because I've been expanding it and coming up with, actually, I haven't mentioned it yet, but coming up with a new way for guys to do it as well. So that's something that I'll roll out soon. But been expanding that course for a while now, and finally next month we're going to be opening it back up for enrollment. So I haven't even opened it up for a while.
And it's called Roosevelt.
It's called the Roosevelt Society.
Why?
So it's called that because Theodore Roosevelt was sort of the best embodiment, in my opinion, of a guy who both balanced sort of the natural needs of a man with that connection with nature, with physical activity, right? Living the strenuous life, getting outdoors, getting active, but also still being in the modern world simultaneously, right? I mean, he was obviously an incredible politician, incredible conservationist. He was a family man, right? He had lots of kids. He was just, he kind of had his foot in both worlds.
Well-rounded
where
everywhere.
and he was an incredibly well-rounded person. I mean, he wrote, I think, something like 43 books during his lifetime, had, just a phenomenal sort of education and just ideas about the world and the people and everything in it. He was definitely a man of his time, but it's amazing to me that he also was able to preserve a lot of his masculine roots and feed that side of him simultaneously, right? He always made time for hunting, for the outdoors, for camping, for physical activity. Right? Even when he was president, right? Even when he was president, he would box in the White House. He had wrestling mats brought in. He'd wrestle. He was a brown belt in judo while he was he got his brown belt while he was in the White House.
Which that's no easy feat. I was talking with a kid and I was like, what does it take to go from a white belt to whatever the next level is? And he was like, it's like 2 years.
Yeah. So he was just, he provides an amazing example of how you can bring it all together, right? He's not a perfect man. He obviously, like anybody, he made mistakes. Yeah. But he is, in my opinion, somebody who established an incredible blueprint for how you can do it now.
Yeah.
And still maintain the old in the new.
Yeah. So what are the biggest principles? I know there's different sections and things like that, but what are the biggest principles of that people would learn as they take the course?
So we start out, first modules, sharpening the axe. So it's all about getting yourself in order, getting your life in order, establishing goals, establishing routines, right? Sort of figuring out what do you actually have going for you and what are things that you need to adjust. And everybody can be optimized. Everybody has things that they can get better at, right?
Yeah, especially with, as you set goals, it's so important for everything, but then if you build your life around achieving those goals, like now you actually have a roadmap.
Yeah. You need to know where you're going.
Yeah.
Right. You can't just get in the car and hit the gas and, hope.
Figure it out on the way, I hope.
Exactly. Like if you're going to sail somewhere, you gotta, you gotta have a course. Like, where do you want to go? Great. And it's not about, okay, we're going to upend your entire life to get there. But, taking a page out of like James Clear's, he has a great book. I'm trying to think what that one's called. Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
Yeah. So James Clear.
Say that. That name sounds so familiar. Now you say the book.
So James Clear has this book, Atomic Habits.
Yep. Great
and
book.
taking a page out of his book, he talks about how, you make these atomic changes, these microscopic little changes, like 1 degree you're shifting, right, that aim.
But changes your life forever.
Change your life forever, right? 1 degree doesn't sound like a lot, but it compiles, right, over the course of time.
Yep.
And so, you start making, in the program, we map out like what areas of life are you doing well in, what areas of life are you doing less well in, and figuring out where you want to be. And once you know where you want to be, you can start laying out the steps you need to get there. And it's not about comparing yourself to how far away you are from your ideal, but rather about establishing, look, realistically, here's where I am, here's where I'm starting, and then measuring your success throughout the course of the program.
Seeing where you came from.
Yeah. It's about the gain, not the gap, right?
Yep.
It's not the
I was just gonna say that. That's
it's a great
one of my
book.
favorite books.
But that's what it's about, and that's why I think that book resonates with people. I think that's why that's one of the reasons why people can maintain that motivation in the program too, because they're focusing on, look, like, yeah, sure, I'm not exactly at my ideal. You're never going to be, right? I mean, that's perfection. That's usually unattainable. But the idea that you can be moving towards it and you're in momentum, and that's huge, man. Just having hope in life, feeling like you're going somewhere, that's big. So
and especially with that, like that book, that was a huge realization for me of like, when you're always looking at the gap, you always feel like I'm less than, or I'm never gonna be this person that should be at this point. And you're comparing it to an ideal that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But if you look back on, this is where I was a year ago, and seeing that progress that's happened is like, oh my gosh, I've accomplished so many things. Like this is, and then you feel good about yourself. You feel good about the things that happened, and it definitely motivates you to say, okay, well, what's the next step?
Yeah, the race is you.
Yeah,
it's with
you're
you. It's not
against
anybody
yourself.
else.
Yeah,
Right. Like
exactly.
what do they say? Comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
And it's true.
is.
It's true. So don't worry about what other people are doing everywhere. Use that maybe as inspiration, but that's not your benchmark. Like, what do you want? What do you want? And that's what guys figure out in that first section. Yeah. And so after we sharpen the axe, then we reconnect with nature. Right. And I have that right at the outset of the program. After we kind of just get these ducks in a row, we immediately send them out. Right. And helping them reconnect with nature. And it's not just understanding why it's good for you, which, obviously we talk about, in spades, but it's actually giving them, 25 different things that they can do now, wherever they are, to get out there and to start reconnecting.
What are the 3 easiest things? Something that people listening can do tomorrow.
Like the absolute easiest, something like going to a park. That simple.
Yeah, bringing your kids to a park and playing with them.
Exactly. And either, with your kids, going by yourself, but it's as simple as maybe going to a park and sitting down and just taking that in for 10 minutes. And there's so many studies that show how beneficial just 10 minutes of sitting in nature can be. And we're not even talking about like forest bathing. Like forest bathing is a whole different thing, right? Where you're going into more denser woods and just kind of melting in the environment and watching it come back to life around you. They're doing that in Japan, by the way. They're taking people out of hospitals and they're driving them out into the woods and they're setting them on like stumps and rocks. Yeah, and they come back and pick them up like 2 hours later, and they've had incredible results, incredible recovery.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's crazy. Again, just like the healing effects of nature, it does, what we do internally, what it does to us, right?
Yeah.
Like it triggers this change in us.
Well, even just grounding, like just being barefoot, like just
100%.
decreases inflammation dramatically, changes neurotransmitters, hormones dramatically. Within very short periods of time.
Yeah, every night after dinner, my wife and I take our son out and we walk barefoot, and we 30 minutes out there. You don't even need that much, but we're walking around for 30 minutes barefoot.
You feel completely different when you do it.
You absolutely do. You'll sleep so much better. It's crazy. Yeah. And you think, wow, it's as if we're almost meant to be barefoot.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah, not wear these foot prisons everywhere.
How much better that is for your feet. Biggest recommendation I give to kids that have like zero or like no arches in their feet. I'm like, they need to be barefoot. They need to build those muscles back up. They need to actually use their feet instead of literally putting, shoes with pretty much, which I'm wearing shoes right now, but basically they're like boots. They're like casts on your feet,
Yeah. But talking about going to the park, and that there's forest bathing if you have, even more isolated area. But you can also be active when you're doing it. So like one of the things I recommend to the program in the program, there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. I call it like becoming a naturalist. And what I mean by that is you go to a park and bring a journal with you. And when you're there, write down the things that you see. Right. So keep track of like what kind of bird activity do you see? Like, do you know do you know what birds those are? Do you know? Maybe you don't know. Maybe you do. Okay. Like just kind of gauge the activity of what's going on around you. Right. Write all that stuff down. If you have your phone, take it out. Right. Not until then, but take it out. Keep it on airplane mode. Snap a picture. Snap a picture of the plants. Snap a picture of the birds. Or again, if you don't even want to use technology, start sketching these things that you're seeing. And whether it's a bird, whether it's this plant or this flower, or whatever it is, sketch that stuff, snap a picture of it, but don't look anything up at the time. Go home, then look it up. Like, what are these things that you're looking at? What are these birds, right? How's this bird different from that bird, right? How's this tree different from that tree? And when you start kind of understanding, wow, all the trees aren't the same. All the birds aren't the same, right? They have different calls. They do different things. They spend their time in different trees. They come at different times of year. Like, you start connecting with the nature around you, and you start understanding it more. And you start seeing it more as, rather, you start seeing it less as being this tourist of nature and more so as a participant within it. And you kind of see yourself as, hey, I guess, I'm part of this ecosystem after all. Like, I'm a living force, right? I've just as much right to be here as anything else does. And I'm just as much a part of it, although I probably don't feel like it, and so on and so forth. Yeah. Like we feel that way. We go to like
First
a
time you
national.
do anything, you feel awkward.
Yeah, sure. But think like you go to a national park, and now so many people visit it as tourists, not as part of it.
Participants.
Yeah, it's like you're like looking through a window in a bakery, and you see the bread in there, and you can smell it, right? You can see it, you can smell it. But it doesn't fill that place, right? It's not the same as actually getting in it. Like you've got to get in it. You got to get your shoes off and get in the grass, get in the dirt, right? You got to walk around and take your time. You got to start seeing nature for what it is and start understanding what it is, and
learning about it.
Yeah, and reconnecting with it. So you were asking about the things you can do, like that's
simple things
right there. It's one of the easiest things is go to a park and you've got a lot of different activities that you can do there, and it's unbelievably good for you.
For sure, 100%. What's the next aspects of the course?
Yeah, so after reconnecting with nature, it's about getting active. It's about moving, okay? Particularly outdoors if you can, but it's still important to get active and to also move heavy things, right? Which is something that we're built for. We're built for work, right? The male body in particular is utilitarian. I don't know if it's particularly beautiful to look at or what, but it's built for use.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what it is. There's a great Seinfeld episode that Elaine's talking about that, where her boyfriend is walking around naked and she's walking around naked and she's appalled by his nakedness and he's obsessed with her nakedness, right? It's like the beauty and then the utilitarian models. Yeah. But it's about that chapter boils down to getting active, moving your body.
Just for a male of just like lifting heavy things, increases your testosterone, which
100%.
makes you feel better, which improves your muscular strength, helps you burn more fat just throughout the entire day. The more muscle you have, the more fat you burn just sitting here.
Yeah, and the mental, even and all that stuff, 100%.
Yeah.
And also just the way it affects your confidence, your self-worth, the way you think about yourself, the way other people see you, and the way other people even treat you.
100%,
right?
Yeah.
I mean,
people have better posture, they're more respected. They're,
absolutely. There's all sorts of studies that show that if you're out of shape, then people see you as, in all sorts of negative light. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're not trying to judge the people, but there's going to be assumptions made about your level of discipline and so on and so forth. So we're made to work. We need to, as you said, testosterone is huge.
Yeah.
Our testosterone levels today are half of what they were for our grandparents, right?
Insane?
Our grandpas had twice as much testosterone on average as we do.
That's great. I mean, think of what they were doing. I mean, I think my grandpa, he's now in a nursing home, but up until his, 85, 86, he was walking, moving, 4 to 5 miles a day. He's out like just doing all kinds of random stuff, like putting dirt down and trying to regrow grass and moving these big buckets of dirt at like 85, 5-gallon things just all over the place.
Could he crush your hand when he shook it?
Oh yeah, just constantly moving. It was, it's kind of insane, but like the work, we say work ethic of their age, but that was what they did.
Yeah, they kept moving.
Yeah.
They kept moving. They worked hard. They were strong because of it. I mean, they were using the tool that they were given.
Yeah. And, even you talk about the grip, I mean, that even just that alone, grip strength is associated with longevity of life.
Yeah. It's one of the best markers.
Yeah.
You know what it also is an indication of? Fighting prowess.
Really?
Yeah. So there's direct correlation between grip strength and the rank of people in combat sports. So champions tend to have much higher grip strength than people below them in rank.
That's super
it's interesting. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Who'd have known?
It's a marker of fighting prowess.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously activity is super important. It's also really good for your brain too, but what's the next?
So activity, lifting heavy things, and getting out in the sun. So that module is actually sun, steel, and steak, because it kind of hits these boxes, right? So you're getting out, you're getting that vitamin D that you need to get, right? It's not about going out, and we talk in detail about it. It's not like going out in the middle of the day in blazing sun and getting burnt. Like that's not what it's about, right? Develop that skin callus early on, and then sort of build that up, and then you can do what our ancestors did, which is you can be outside all the time and you're not going to have to worry about it.
Yeah, I can't tell you the last time I wore sunscreen. I haven't been burned in years.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, 100%.
Especially if you get out early in the day too. That's also prevents you from getting burnt later in the day.
Yeah, yeah. So, and it's so important for testosterone. The sun is.
Oh, yeah,
Like you have
100%.
to have it in order to.
You have to have vitamin D to produce.
Yeah, exactly. You have to have
hormones.
the vitamin D in order to produce that stuff. So it's all about getting outside, getting active, and eating the right stuff. And a lot of that right stuff is sort of going back to, again, like what were the things that we ate for most of human history?
Goldfish.
Exactly. So after that, then we talk about the importance of forming a brotherhood. Okay.
Yeah.
And so men need relationship with other men. There's a whole separate module on the masculine in relationships. So there's a whole separate module on your relationship with your wife, with your family. And that's unbelievably important, obviously. But it's also really important for men to be around other men.
Yeah.
And we're designed to function in small groups of men. That's how we're designed, right? To work in hunting parties. Again, going back to the very beginning of our conversation, that's why in like these first-person shooter games, they'll have like clans, or they'll have like these posses or whatever. Yeah. The groups are always usually 5 to 6 people, somewhere around there. And again, that's the prime, evolutionarily, that was around the prime number of what these male groups were. And you see this a lot in a lot of different sports too, like basketball. Yeah, exactly. So you see that stuff. And when you break down even like the military, they know this stuff. And so when they break it down, your smallest group is basically consists of the same number of people, right? Your squad or what have you. Yeah.
That's why I only have a few friends.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we can have a lot of acquaintances, but it's important to create meaningful, deep, meaningful, real relationships with other men. But it's not just any other men. And that's one of the big things that we get into is it's making sure you have the right type of men in your life, right? Like, show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, you're as rich as your 5 best friends or whatever.
Yeah. You're an average of the 5 guys you spend the most amount of time with. And again, like, it sounds bad, but I kind of get the guys to take a step back and just ask some hard questions. And one of those hard questions is, like, this guy, he's your best friend. Like, oh yeah, he's my best friend. He's been my best friend for 20 years. Like, was he your best friend 20 years ago, or is he still your best friend now, in the sense of the things that brought you guys together then, are those even relevant anymore? Yeah. Right? Does this person help lift you up? Do they motivate you? Are they that type of friend that you need, that is gonna,
at this time in your life?
Yeah, at this time in your life, right? Like, are they the right influence that you need? And for a lot of guys, they find out that maybe these aren't the right people to spend my time with. Yeah, you only live once. No, I mean, that's it. And you got to be careful about the influence that you have around you. And why not have the people around you that are going to help sort of make you, forge you into the best version of yourself.
Get you to the goals that you set up.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want somebody being like, no, you've done enough. You're good. Yeah. I mean, that's great. Right. But that's kind of like, isn't that what your mom and dad are, in some ways? You're like, hey, like, good job, son. We love you no matter what, Yeah. It's good for them to push you as well. But you also, I don't want my friends to just tell me all the things I'm doing right. 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 I want them to point out ways that I can improve. I want them to hold me accountable.
You should do it this way. You should try it this way. You should do that.
Yeah. I want to be inspired by my friends. I want them to hold me accountable. I want to aspire to the same level as them. Right. Like if you're in a room and you're, out of all your friends, if you're the person who's doing this and doing this and doing this and doing this, and the people around you aren't, well, okay, like it's going to curtail your ability to expand yourself and
expand your mind.
Yeah, into like your full potential. And so, it's not to sound coarse or anything like that, but it's important to have the right brotherhood of men around you. And so we talk about that and how to create it. Yeah. That's the other thing. It's not just, hey, this would be great if you could have this, but it's where you find these guys and how do you create those relationships?
An aspect of that is, like, I mean, you in a way are a coach for these people, but like, I think it's really important to find a coach that knows how to do something that you want to do. Like if it's running a marathon, you need to find a coach that knows how to do that. Yeah. If you want to you want to make $1 million, you need to find a coach that's gone through the steps to do that. If you want to be better at XYZ, you have to find someone that's already done it and gone through it. And like, that's again, now part of your circle of people.
Yeah.
And like, you're doing the same thing. You're coaching them on how you get to these aspects, and you get there 100 times faster.
Yeah. You don't have to invent the wheel on your own, right?
Yeah,
Find people who are doing it, shadow them, get out there. That's a big thing. I mean, it's Brotherhood. It's in that module, we also talk about mentorship being huge, right? It's finding the right mentors, as you're talking about, finding the right mentors, and then hopefully getting to the point that you can be a good mentor yourself. And maybe you are, but just kind of thinking about that as you're developing on your own.
How you can help other people.
Yeah, how you can get there. And so then after that, we dive into the importance of adventure and risk, which just not a lot of that today, right? We've curtailed it significantly. Everything is clearly demarcated, right? Like the curb, anything past the curb is dangerous, right? Right. This is dangerous. That's dangerous. Stay away from that. Yeah. But that line out in nature, that line is blurred. And that's one of the great things is you can find a lot of adventure out in nature still. It's still there. There's no curb, right?
There's no ropes telling you can't go anywhere.
Yeah. And it's not about doing stupid stuff in nature, but it's the importance of getting out and having adventures. I mean, it's about your spirit is what that's about.
Yeah. Who doesn't like exciting things and looking back on exciting things of, I did that. That was so much fun. That was so exciting. That was scary. And
yeah. And it's taking measured risks, right? Again, it's not I'm going to jump out of an airplane because I have to have this rush. It's just more about, okay, well, consider your situation and your risk tolerance.
Yeah.
But it's important to have those moments that make you feel alive.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be anything
when's
crazy.
The last time you did something that made you feel a little scared or a little like, that's a big challenge or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Those things are really important. I mean, we don't think about them and because we don't do them anymore.
Yeah. I think too, a lot of people, if you've ever heard the quote, people say something along the lines of, our generation is this one where we're too late to explore and we're too early to go out and explore space, right? Like everything's been discovered here and we don't have the technology to get into space and to explore out there. So we're just kind of stuck here. And I hate that because there's so much still out there that's you can engage in that's adventurous. Like a lot of it's, accessible even.
Yeah.
I'm not talking like you can go to the Amazon. There are civilizations down there, surely, that we haven't found, but that's not what I'm getting into. But
I have a book that I was just looking at yesterday. I've had it for years, and it's 1,000 adventures, and it's basically stuff all over the world. And I kept looking. I was like, oh my gosh, this would be awesome. I should do this. I should do this. I mean, there's so many things out there you would never know.
Well, you and I have talked about. I mean, how many times have we come up with different things that we've wanted to do? We wanted to do
cattle drive.
Yeah, that was like the first thing, right? We were dead set. We wanted to do our cattle drive. The old-fashioned cattle drive. Yeah.
Now I'm convincing you into running Leadville with me, but
that's another one, right? I mean that's an adventure for sure.
I just got a coach, so.
Oh well, this will be
we're ready. We are ready.
We are ready. Yeah. And I go to Canada in a week, so I'm gonna go up there on my fly-in adventure again. But that's it's great to have sort of these big adventures once a year. Yeah. That's how I kind of talk about in the program is every year try to do some big adventure, but also once a month work in these smaller adventures. And, we give a lot of ideas on how people can do that. And
That's awesome.
Yeah. So adventure and risk. And then the last one is just about crafting your legacy. It's about thinking long-term about sort of, I don't know, what you're going to leave behind someday.
Yeah. What people are going to learn from you.
Yeah. What people are going to learn from you. I think a lot about like my grandfathers and these were men of high standards. They had just an unbelievable amount of skills. They could do everything. Mm-hmm. Right? They fixed their own cars. They weren't mechanics. Like one laid flooring and the other one was a farmer who became a postman later. And these guys, again, they fixed their own cars. They could build their own homes. They fixed everything, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, whatever. They were hunters. They were anglers. They made their own bows. They made their own arrows. They loaded their own ammunition. They played musical instruments, right? They sang, they did, like they were so, they were Renaissance men. They had all this broad breadth of skills that nowadays we're so hyper specialized. We're so over specialized in what you do, right? Like I'm a computer programmer, that's all I do, and like, great, what else can you do?
Nothing.
I mean, right. I mean, it's something to think about.
It is.
And
I was at a funeral this last weekend for a family member on my wife's side, and it was just goes along with what you're saying here is, the eulogy and everything is his grandkids coming up, basically saying what they learned from him, and not only like more on faith and hardworking and how he was always there, and like that's how he'll be remembered forever. And it made me think back of like, well, what, if I was passed away right now, what would I had been remembered for by my family and my friends and those things? And it really makes you think back of like, what do I want to be? What do I, in crafting your life around that and making sure that you're diligent about that, it is something that a lot of people don't think about until it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to think about it early on. As you said, people pass away at every age. I mean, you never know when it's coming. And, you're talking about your grandpa he's still alive, right? Like my grandpa I think he was 60 and he was retired and he was working at a museum and he was building an exhibit and he fell through the ceiling, died. It's just it's crazy.
Freak accident.
Yeah, freak accident. But what's amazing though is sort of seeing the life that they led and the men that they were. For me, but for me, it's unbelievably inspiring, and it makes me want to kind of craft my life similarly in how I live it, the relationship I have with my my family, my wife, my kid, my friends, my community, all that stuff, and thinking about everything that what skills do I have, what skills can I acquire, and how can I use them to kind of impact everything around me.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
It's awesome, man. Well, thank you. I appreciate your time. I'm excited. Hopefully we get, more men into your program. Super excited for anyone that takes it. Honestly, it'll be just completely different people after it. I appreciate the conversation today, man.
Yeah.
It was
awesome.
It's always fun. We'll have to do more of these for sure. Any last words?
Yeah. So you guys can find me on my YouTube channel. It's just Man vs. History. Yeah. So you can find me at Man vs. History on YouTube. And then the Roosevelt Society website it's www.roosevelt-society.com.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks for being on today, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
If you like the show, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Love to have you follow us. Love to have you help learn how to help kids if you're a doctor or a parent that's maybe struggling a little bit, of different things you can do to help your own kid. So see you next time.